what if the big events, the direction of the 20th century wasn't quite what it seemed? Like maybe there were hidden hands involved?
It's, well, a provocative thought to start with.
Right. And it leads us straight into today's topic. We're diving deep into something really unsettling, highly secretive. It's based on the material you, our listener, actually shared with us.
That's right. The book, The Illuminati Formula, used to create an undetectable, total mind-controlled slave by Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier.
Yeah, quite a title, and definitely not light reading.
No, it's challenging material.
Hmm.
And your willingness, to even engage with these kinds of disturbing allegations, it's really noteworthy.
So our mission today, what are we trying to do here?
Well, the goal is basically to pull out the core claims of this supposed formula. We're focusing on how they allegedly selected victims, prepared them, and the very first steps in creating what the book calls a mind-controlled slave.
Okay. And just to be super clear up front.
Absolutely crucial. We're only talking about what's in this book, nothing more.
Exactly. We're not saying this is true. We're not endorsing it, especially any, political stuff in there.
No opinions, no validation, just exploring the text itself.
Think of it like your shortcut through this really dense, frankly shocking material. We're trying to pull out the key moments, the aha bits maybe, without you having to wade through everything.
Hopefully making a very complex, very dark topic a bit more understandable just by looking at what the authors wrote.
Okay, so let's start unpacking it. What's the absolute core claim of this book?
The fundamental idea, really, is that there's this systematic method, a step-by-step process.
Developed by who?
Supposedly by groups like, well, the Illuminati, obviously, given the title, and maybe elements within intelligence agencies.
And the goal?
To create people who are totally mind-controlled using trauma, severe trauma.
Which leads to the multiple personalities.
That's the claim, what we now call dissociative identity disorder, or DID. They argue it's deliberately induced through this trauma-based programming.
The book seems pretty upfront about how serious it considers this. The dedication and warning, right?
Oh, absolutely. It starts with a dedication to millions of Americans, the authors claim, were programmed this way. The stated goal is exposure, dismantling this whole thing.
And the warning.
It's stark. A very strong caution to any reader who thinks they might have gone through this kind of mind control, saying, digging into this stuff without professional help could be dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Potentially severe psychological distress, it says. Even potentially fatal consequences if someone under mind control uncovers things without guidance. They explicitly say they're not responsible if the information is misused.
I'd also like to talk more about my when I was used in Boise for an assassination attempt. This took place where I was placed on top of Zion's Bank, and I was going to be made to shoot a man who was coming out of the Neurolox. But not only was I supposed to shoot the man coming out of the Neurolox, the whole assassination was going to be covered up under the guise of a mass shooting. So I was supposed to unload my weapon on the entire crowd of people coming out of the bar at 2 a.m, all being kicked out of the bar. I was supposed to kill the target. One of my friend's sisters had seen me in the bar. She had almost compromised me, and she was to be second. That was to be executed, was her. I was supposed to shoot the target, and then I was supposed to shoot her. And then I was supposed to unload my weapon on everyone else. And that whole thing broke down. My programming broke down. I had been smoking marijuana with a couple friends of mine a short time before all that went down. Marijuana is the only drug that I know of that mind slaves aren't allowed to have. We were fed all kinds of drugs in the project. I witnessed people doing coke. I was made to do LSD. I was made to take all kinds of things. I don't even know what they were. We called them potions, and my uncle had this little black box filled with vials that he called potions, and they'd always be giving those to me when we were on operation. But yeah, a very bad deal.
Wow. Okay, that sets a heavy tone right away. So who are the people making these claims, the authors?
Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier. The book mentions their alleged experience and research in this area. They apparently worked together before on a related book about Monarch mind control.
And Springmeier, he wrote other stuff too.
Yeah. Individually, he researched the Illuminati, wrote the top 13 Illuminati families, apparently. They present themselves as having, direct experience with people who claim they were Monarch programmed.
And Fritz Springmeier wrote the introduction himself. I remember it being pretty forceful.
Extremely forceful. He flat out states that this trauma-based mind control, as they describe it, is the, quote, greatest danger to the human race.
Wow.
Yeah. He connects its supposed effectiveness directly to secrecy.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Saying these organizations couldn't hide their dark, evil deeds without this kind of sophisticated control.
He also talks about where these techniques supposedly came from historically.
Right. The book suggests it wasn't invented overnight. It claims the techniques evolved over centuries within, like German, Scottish, Italian, English Illuminati families.
Going back how far?
Some accounts mention trace it all the way back to ancient Egypt, Babylon, mystery religions. That's quite a claim.
And more recently.
It highlights Nazi interest, specifically. Early German research on, like, personality switching and even demonic possession. It names Trogat Konstantin Osterreich, an early 20th century researcher.
Okay. And intelligence agencies get pulled in, too.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah.
MI6 is mentioned early on in the 20th century. But the book also claims their records were routinely destroyed or manipulated. Hard to verify, obviously.
Convenient, maybe.
Well, that's the narrative presented. Then the Candy Jones case comes up. That's supposedly when the secrecy started to crack a bit.
And that led to...
According to the book, it led to the whole false memory syndrome campaign as a way to discredit victims and cover things up again. Of course, the history and interpretation here are highly debated outside of this text.
It definitely sounds like they're trying to build this picture of a really old, really hidden practice. And then there's that analogy they use, the recipe.
Yeah, they're very direct about that. The book says its goal is to give you a step-by-step recipe for making a monarch mind-controlled slave.
A recipe.
That's the term they use. They argue if you understand the ingredients and the process, then the possibility, the motive behind it all becomes clear. They even say they'll name names in places.
Okay. Let's get into this recipe then. The first science they outline is the selection and preparation of the victim. What's involved in that initial stage?
It covers several key things. First off, genetics, or at least the belief in a genetic component.
Genetics for what?
For the ability to dissociate. You know, that psychological process where your mind kind of checks out under extreme stress. It's central to developing multiple personalities under trauma.
And they think that's inherited.
The book claims it is, yeah.
Right.
It gives examples like certain American Indian tribes, Indian fakirs, yogis, Tibetan Buddhists, Vodun practitioners, even children from families with multi-generational abuse.
Right, those groups.
Because they supposedly show a natural tendency towards dissociation, which European occultists allegedly studied way back. They even claim there's a test done around 18 months old to see how dissociative a child is, to see if they're a good candidate for programming.
And the selection, it's not the same for everyone, right? It depends on the goal.
Exactly. The book makes this distinction between Illuminati hierarchy slaves and expendable slaves.
Okay, what's the difference there?
Hierarchy slaves, they're described as having hidden family backgrounds, really elaborate cover stories, lots of layers of programming, often used to program others, apparently. And the abuse is supposedly less obvious physically.
And the expendable ones?
They're depicted more as, like, sex slaves, people used for sabotage, breeders, soldiers, drug mules, often with visible scars from torture.
Where do these expendable slaves supposedly come from?
The book claims they're often children whose parents were blackmailed or forced by the CIA or maybe sold by parents involved in pedophilia or pornography rings, supposedly hidden under the National Security Act.
That's gross.
And it gets worse. The book alleges these expendable slaves are programmed knowing they'll likely be killed or thrown from the freedom train, as the supposed code phrase goes.
Alex Huxley, in his novel Brave New World, laid out the various levels of humanity that the occult wishes to make permanent. In regards to Lucifer's plans for you, you will have heard that there are alpha males, beta bureaucrats, gamma servants, delta builders,
I'm a mechanical boy.
and epsilon moron menial laborers.
Around age 30.
And the book singles out certain types of parents?
Yes, it makes some really disturbing claims. It says pedophile fathers are, quote, most preferred for offering their kids for programming
Why?
because they're seen as having less conscience, easier to keep manipulating. It contrasts them with fathers who might molest older daughters, who are seen as having too much conscience for the programmer's liking.
This is deeply unpleasant stuff.
It really is. And the book connects this all back to the CIA and the Illuminati early on.
How does it describe that connection?
It claims the Illuminati were behind the creation of the CIA, that some CIA directors were even Illuminati members.
A symbiotic relationship.
That's the idea. The CIA acts as a kind of front, because the Illuminati itself needs secrecy, needs these other organizations to operate through.
Like programming sites.
Exactly. State mental hospitals, McGill University's psychiatric network, NASA in Huntsville, the Presidio military base, China Lake. These are named as examples. Even the alleged takeover of Boys Town in the 50s is mentioned as a source for children.
And is there a main figure they point to who supposedly got this large-scale programming going?
According to this source, yes. Joseph Mengele.
Mengele, the Nazi doctor.
The very same. The book claims he was the original lead programmer for this Monarch programming. It says he had a high rank in the Illuminati, skills in music, Kabbalah, magic, dancing, abortions, torture.
Torture skills attributed to his sadistic mother, the text notes.
Right? And child programming. It alleges many kids he programmed in the camps actually survived, and some even had bizarrely positive feelings towards him.
How did he end up involved after the war, according to this book?
It claims he was smuggled into the U.S. after Auschwitz disappeared, specifically to use his knowledge more broadly. Traveled a lot, often with black servants, apparently.
And survivors supposedly remembered him.
The book claims survivors recall his German uniform, boots, accent, his whole manner. It suggests his notorious selections at Auschwitz were partly about choosing subjects for these mind-control trauma experiments, especially identical twins for the genetic angle.
It's almost impossible to fathom that level of claimed cruelty. We have to stress, these are claims from the book, Mengele's documented atrocities or historical fact, but this specific narrative comes from this source.
Absolutely. Extreme caution is needed here. The book then contrasts the programming methods used before Mengele with what came after.
How so?
It says the pre-Mengele Illuminati techniques were maybe less sophisticated than what the Nazi Germans developed, which allegedly pulled research from all over Europe.
But the suffering was the same.
The book emphasizes that, yes. For children born into Illuminati families, the programming is supposedly planned by the circle before they're even born, different from kids taken from foster care or sold.
And these hierarchy kids then program others.
That's the claim. Hierarchy slaves program and train other hierarchy children. Others are just seen as expendable. It mentions this group, Mariah, the Illuminati, having huge numbers, and all members supposedly get some mind control, even if not full DD.
And normal therapy wouldn't work for them.
Dismissed as totally inadequate for someone born into that system, according to the text.
So how do kids outside these alleged Illuminati lines get drawn in?
Well, the book describes this awful alleged practice. Children in foster homes, adoptive situations, orphanages, maybe living with non-relatives, being sold to intelligence agencies because they're vulnerable.
Sold for mind control.
That's the allegation. And because so many organizations are supposedly controlled by the Illuminati network, a programmed person might seem to work for one group, but the Illuminati have the underlying control.
So they can be moved around.
Apparently. Used across different parts of this network, like Delta models for assassinations within Delta Force, Beta models for sexual purposes, specific roles.
The initial preparation sounds incredibly detailed, focusing on senses and intelligence.
Oh yeah, the book gets specific. How interactions with babies are supposedly designed to maximize brain development in certain areas, using visual matching games, full sensory training.
Birth programming from birth.
Pretty much. Braun dams involved allegedly show faces, objects, to create mirror images in the baby's mind, training all the senses for this mirroring purpose, teaching the baby to copy, reflect, repeat.
Intelligence is important too.
Seen as essential, yeah. Intelligence and creativity. Methods are supposedly used to boost these even psychic abilities, allegedly. Head programmers have these mottos about needing a structured mind in the slave, starting right from birth.
Then this name comes up, John Gittinger. Who was he?
Gittinger is presented as really key, especially for understanding the infant mind. A psychologist, worked in mental assessment for years.
Where'd he work?
Directed psychological services at a state hospital in Oklahoma, the book says. and then got involved with the CIA's MKUltra program around 1950.
MKUltra, the real mind control program.
Right. And his work on personality assessment was supposedly super classified, vital to Monarch programming, according to this book.
And his big contribution was the PAS, personality assessment system. Tell us about that.
The PAS, yeah. It's described as this incredible way to evaluate behavior, predict actions. A lot of it's still classified, the book claims.
How did it work?
It's reportedly based on sorting people along 3 main scales: internalizer, externalizer, or EII, regulated flexible, RF, and role adaptive role uniform, AU.
So like personality types?
Kind of. And the book claims a baby's initial score on these scales is mostly innate, and it predicts their future role, how they should be programmed.
Any examples?
Like an IFA profile supposedly points to someone who could be a social or religious reformer, so the programming would be tailored for that. It mentions personality can change later through compensation or modification.
It sounds really complex.
Extremely detailed, apparently. Huge number of possible personality types, allowing for very specific programming. Gittinger's understanding, combined with the PAS, supposedly gave him this deep insight into minds, which he then allegedly used for programming kids.
And they used EEG brain scans, too. How did that fit in?
The book claims EEG patterns correlate with part of the PAS, specifically the digit span test for memory, which relates to that EI dimension.
So EEG could help assess personality.
Supposedly, yeah. Helped get around cultural biases and, crucially, allowed them to assess babies before they could talk. It cites some research from the 60s by Saunders and Mundy-Castle linking brainwaves and cognition.
What was the EEG procedure like, according to the book?
It describes electrodes placed on a small child's head, repeated testing, attendants telling the child to stay completely still. The pattern supposedly revealed the child's PAS type.
And the PAS revealed weaknesses, too.
Yeah, it allegedly showed a person's vulnerabilities, their desires, the book calls them soft spots, and also how easily hypnotizable they were.
What if a child wasn't easily hypnotized?
They might be rejected from the program, the book says, or subjected to more extreme methods to force compliance.
The book then lists a ton of organizations allegedly part of this mind control network.
Oh, it's a massive list. Covers everything. Intelligence agencies, CIA, FBI, NSA, military intelligence.
Religious groups.
Yep. Catholic Church, Jesuits, Church of Satan, Scientology, Mormons.
Secret societies, entertainment, crime.
Freemasons, OTO, Hollywood, country music, pro-baseball, mafia, KKK, even the Russian government and intelligence.
Yeah.
It's incredibly broad.
And the point is?
The book emphasizes this network is the backbone of the planned New World Order. And the Illuminati are supposedly involved at every level as perpetrators and sometimes even as victims within their own system.
Okay, after all that setup, the book gets into 4 foundational stages for the programming itself. Let's take the first one. Spiritual preparations and in-utero traumatization, the Moon Children. That title alone.
Yeah, it's disturbing. This first stage, as described, is about spiritual preparations and deliberately traumatizing the child in the womb.
Spiritual preparations? Like what?
It talks about generational satanic families. Their children are allegedly considered Satan's property, making them ideal for programming and for layering in demonic forces through blood rituals.
And moonchild rituals.
These are described as ceremonies to demonize the fetus with powerful demons, requiring blood, human sacrifices. It brings in Aleister Crowley.
Crowley, the occultist.
Described here as a Satanist, Freemason, OTO leader, and alleged MI6 agent. His book Moonchild, as discussed, is about capturing a soul into a body. The book interprets parts of it symbolically, like a villa called Butterfly Net, linking butterflies to souls or demons, and the Monarch project name.
So the rituals are based on Crowley's work.
The book claims the actual rituals are detailed in his writings: moon temples, invocations, symbolic acts, and this alleged demonization of the fetus, supposedly kept secret from most of the slaves' future personalities, the alters.
Anything else in this stage?
The claim that the Illuminati intentionally set up the child's life to violate the 10 Commandments, like encouraging birth out of wedlock, and the in-utero trauma itself.
How would they do that?
Physically, using needles on the fetus is one claim. Psychologically, by severely traumatizing the pregnant mother abandonment, loud noises followed suddenly by love, drawing on alleged observations of high-level satanic families and Italian witchcraft traditions.
Okay, that's stage 1. Stage 2 is the trauma of a premature birth. Why premature?
The book argues a premature birth is preferred because of the natural trauma it causes the baby. It even cites stats linking preemies to later child abuse.
So they induce it.
That's the claim, sometimes deliberately induced. Using special drugs to put the mother in a deep trance during early labor, then shocking her out of it for delivery, supposedly creates massive stress for both.
And this links to a breeder system.
Yeah, another disturbing concept. Women, sometimes preemies themselves, allegedly used just to produce babies for programming or sacrifice, with a limit, maybe 2-3 preemie births because of the risk to the mother.
Hospitals are involved.
Hospitals in certain cities are alleged to be infiltrated by occult-loyal doctors and nurses who help facilitate these premature births for programming, targeting low-income mothers sometimes.
Is there a reason why the trauma of being premature is useful, according to the book?
It supposedly creates a fighter spirit in the baby, needed to survive the later tortures. It also mentions how standard medical care for preemies, catheters, IVs, oxygen naturally contributes to this early trauma. And preemies tend to be, more sober, less socially interactive.
And the programmers take advantage of this.
Absolutely. A deliberate effort, the book claims, to make sure the baby's first sight is a future programmer, using loving tones to create that first bond. Mengele was supposedly an expert at this.
Seeing the child as
A piece of clay, malleable, using a soothing voice to exploit the baby's already dissociated state, planting hypnotic suggestions early on.
teaching the child what?
To see the programmer as basically God, the controller of life, to be worshipped. Plus, early cognitive training, subliminal tapes, accelerated reading methods, and specific hypnosis techniques for preverbal babies. Rubbing, stroking, gentle female programmers often used, and strict obedience training, like taping the mouth shut to stop crying.
Then step 3 sounds almost opposite. Love bombing the child until about 18 months.
It seems paradoxical, right? But the book explains this intense love is only given so it can be traumatically taken away later.
So it's strategic love.
Entirely strategic. Illuminati kids aren't spanked during this time, apparently, just lovingly controlled. Focus on positive development, cleanliness, preparing them for the later trauma, essentially.
And the dissociation is already there.
Yeah, the book reminds us dissociation is already present from genetics, maybe the premature birth. The child builds this exclusive bond of trust, obedience, adoration only with the programmer, and their mind is aligning with all the hypnotic cues being fed to them.
Which leads directly to the 4th step, fracturing the mind. This is where the split happens.
This is it. It builds on the dissociation from steps 1 and 2 and uses the love bond from step 3 as leverage.
How does the fracturing work?
For preemies, the mind often splits along the fault lines already created by that birth trauma, the book suggests. For other babies, they induce dissociation by overwhelming the senses, foul smells, feeding blood, chanting, noise, spinning, sleep deprivation, drugs. It mentions eyewitness reports of kids looking like zombies, totally numb.
And then the love bombing ends.
Abruptly and brutally, stripping away the love, subjecting the child to torment, caging, starving, freezing, electric shocks.
And when the programmer reappears.
The child is desperate, relieved, highly dissociated. Then the programmer shows a vicious side. That betrayal, the abuse coming from the figure they loved and trusted. That's what supposedly forces the mind to split along those pre-existing lines.
The double bind concept.
Exactly. Holding two totally opposite, irreconcilable views of someone crucial. That's presented as the core splitting mechanism. It cites a dissertation by Jody Leonhardt on this.
So the ability to dissociate comes from genetics, birth trauma, and this conditioning.
That's the formula presented.
Yep.
Genetics, maybe traumatic birth, and conditioning via shock, sensory overload, sleep deprivation, drugs, all happening at the initial programming center. This first sadistic abuse to split the mind. They call it severing the core.
Severing the core. What is the core in their view?
Okay, this is important. For the programmers, the core isn't really an alter personality. It's more like the original unsplit essence of the mind, the energy source for the whole system of alters.
And they don't touch it.
They try not to. They want to hide it, wall it off, because the mind instinctively protects it. It might even sabotage therapy if the core feels threatened.
So they separate it from the alters.
Deliberately. They supposedly figured out in the 1940s that if the core connected with the alters, the person might reintegrate, heal. So they hide the core, often deep within the first splits, dehumanizing these parts into things like gems or crystals. Yeah, symbolic representations that supposedly power the system. They might create a dissociative carousel around the core too, like a barrier. And the toddler switch is mentioned as the first foundational split.
So there isn't one real person in charge.
The major mistake that therapists make when trying to heal Luciferian ritualized abuse is that they believe that somewhere within the victim is the real person, and that all the rest are merely subordinate alters. While it is true that the individual's spirit within holds the pure mind of the person, if the elements that make up the person's physical personality are fractured from birth, then the personality is fractured. Many of these fractures have been built into full-blown personalities with separate memories. Thus, there is no single, real physical personality. It is more like a mirror that has been broken.
Not in the way we usually think, just walled-off fragments. They might even program mock cores, alters that think they're the core, often in denial about the whole situation. They even misuse Bible verses in programming related to the core, apparently.
What about those first splits? Are they important?
Very. They're stronger, closer to the original mind, but unwanted splits get thrown into mental garbage dumps. These splits can happen really early, even in the womb, which is why doing step 4 around 18 months is supposedly crucial to stop them merging back together.
And they use these early splits.
Some are used as strong front alters, the ones interacting with the world. They also create decoys, opposing alters, like one who loves the programmer, one who hates them, to keep therapists busy, chasing shadows.
It sounds like a constantly shifting maze.
Exactly. The whole alter system is designed to shift, hide. They use layers, demonic influence, hypnotic illusions to obscure who's who.
Any other tricks mentioned?
Encouraging early front splits to accept Christianity, apparently to make the trauma worse when they later create satanic altars. Needing a balance of capabilities in the system so it doesn't become purely evil and unstable. Creating mirror images of altars.
And the bottom line is?
As long as dissociation exists, the programmers can keep manipulating. Integration is possible, the book says, but only if the deprogrammer understands all these layers and tricks. It also notes that as people get older, the memory walls might weaken, leading to flashbacks, but that might just be dismissed as senility.
Okay, the chapter wraps up with a few more points on selection, doesn't it? Beyond genetics and age.
Right. Physical traits are mentioned. Preferred types are allegedly blue-eyed, blonde Caucasians, no visible defects or scars. Similar to Masonic criteria, the book claims.
And the timing.
Trauma-based control usually starts before age 6. It can happen later, but the trauma-induced splits are supposedly better hidden than purely hypnotic ones. Not everyone claimed to be an SRA survivor necessarily has a full alter system, though.
But the book focuses on the infant programming.
Yes, the Monarch systems created by programming infants are presented as the most devastating and effective method. It also loops back to alleged Catholic Church and Jesuit involvement, claiming they believe they can control destiny through early programming, the keys to the kingdom.
Let's drag some of this history into the light by stepping into the darkness. Or as the Luciferians say, let's turn the key of the kingdom.
What about programming adults?
Briefly mentioned. Criteria include dissociation ability, availability, military tests, school records, potential outcomes. Working for intelligence, becoming POWs, ending up in mental hospitals, working for Illuminati-linked companies, or even becoming actors.
And the needs differ. Intelligence agencies versus Illuminati.
Yeah, intel agencies might want more external control. The Illuminati, needing total secrecy, require deeper, fail-safe systems. It mentions demonic imps, layered in again to guard memories, needing specific therapeutic approaches.
Any other programmer types?
A brief mention of renegade Illuminati programmers, who can supposedly program non-Illuminati kids effectively.
So the takeaway from this whole section is
that it's all highly planned, incredibly precise, total control over the slave's life, different uses for different people, and the programming itself is designed to be unbreakable.
wow. Okay. This first deep dive into just the selection and preparation, it's been, undeniably disturbing. Incredibly detailed.
It paints a truly chilling picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Systematic manipulation on just a staggering scale, according to this source.
And for you listening, the person who brought this source to us, we get it. This is shocking information. It's a lot to take in, right?
It absolutely is. And considering, the sheer level of intricate detail they describe just for these initial stages, selection, preparation, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What could the long-term effects possibly be for someone subjected to that kind of profound systematic manipulation? And maybe even bigger. What does this narrative suggest about potential hidden forces shaping not just individuals, but maybe even, society itself?
That's definitely a chilling thought to leave us with as we wrap up this first part.